Good morning. This morning, finally, question number 7. And that is, what questions should you be asking the interior designer that you want to hire? These are very important, and some of them will be what you expect. Some of them maybe not as much. Question number 1 is probably one that you already know. I will assume that you've already been checking their portfolio pictures, looking at how they design, and that you like some of the work that they've done, either because they've come up with great ideas or you like the style or whatever it is. Also, most people are aware to ask for references. You want at least 2 or 3 references, preferably 3. The important part of this is that you want to actually contact the references, not just ask for them. And when you are talking to the references that they give you, there are some important questions that you will want to ask them. And these are, first and foremost, did they feel heard? Do they feel like the interior designer was listening with the intent to hear what they wanted and what their ultimate goals were? Very important. Did they suggest inventive and innovative solutions? Did they come up with some good ideas to solve some of the solutions or challenges that they were running into? Pretty much every design runs into some kind of a challenge, either how you get what you want into a space or how to solve a challenge that's in the space itself. And so you want to make sure that they have the ability and experience to create some fun and effective solutions for those. Did they work well with their contractor? This is also extremely important. If the interior designer cannot work well with a contractor, communicate, and find solutions that happen, most especially in remodels, there's always, once you start tearing things out, moving walls, removing drywall, moving things around, you're always, actually 100% of the time, going to run into something that you didn't expect to run into, and you want to make sure that your interior designer can both communicate effectively with a contractor in a language they understand to find solutions that, again, marry great solutions, hopefully low cost, and still get you into a space that you're going to love when all is said and done. So very important. And if you can, get the name and phone number of their contractor so you can call the contractor themselves and ask them how they liked working with the interior designer. That's also very important. Did they communicate well and consistently? So not only during the design process, which for an interior designer is the fun part for most of us, we also like to see the finished product. The nuts and bolts of getting into the final material selection, not selections, but the ordering and talking to the contractor and working through the project while it's going on, being available to answer questions quickly, because in the process, the longer it takes to answer questions, the more delays you get in a project. So you want to make sure that that they were effective and quick in response to communicate both with the homeowner and the contract through the whole process. Another question is that, did they receive value? Did they feel like they really got a great value for what they paid for with their interior designer? That's going to be important. And then do they recommend this designer to their friends and families and coworkers, right? If they're willing to refer them, then you're pretty sure that they did a good job, and the client is really happy with that. Not everybody's going to come out and say, oh, they're horrible, or that some people are very uncomfortable with those types of conversations. So this is one of those really great ways to see if they would follow up. Would they use them again, and do they refer them out to their family and friends and coworkers? So that's the questions that you want to ask the references, whether it's via email or phone. And the more excitement that you hear from those references in their project and how they like their space, it's even better if they've been in it for a year or longer. Those are the best references, because then they've really had the opportunity to use the space and have a better idea of what kind of a finished product they actually got. So contract. A professional interior designer is going to have some kind of a contract for you to sign that will go over what is included and excluded, what pricing they're going to charge for what services, and so on. You want to remember a couple of things. You are the client, and so you deserve to have final input on any decisions that are made in regards to the products, the design solutions, the layout, and that kind of thing. Obviously, if you're hiring an interior designer, you want to honor and respect their experience, but also remember that it is you that is going to be living in the house, and you that is going to be using the space. And if you really don't like something they're suggesting, no matter what the reason is, share the reason. That's even better, because then you can come up with creative solutions. But you want to make sure that there's not a clause in there that it excludes you from making those final decisions. Termination clause. Every contract is going to have some kind of a termination clause. Watch out for minimum charges if you terminate a contract, and just make sure it's, in general, a boilerplate termination. Everybody has the right to walk away. Fees that'll be paid for work done to date, that kind of thing, and we'll get to that in just a minute also. And then every contract is going to have some kind of an arbitration clause. Make sure that it is equitable and that arbitration is the first line of defense, that you find a neutral party to arbitrate any kind of dispute on the contract before you move into any kind of court or civil suits. And most of those will be boilerplate clauses in any contract, but just check them for any inconsistencies or anything that looks out of ordinary. Also, billing. So back to the billing. I strongly recommend that you are billed weekly. This will maintain a consistent communication. One, also it will make sure that you are not suddenly hit with, this $5,000 or $10,000 design bill that you weren't expecting because they went 2 or 3 weeks doing work that you weren't, it can accumulate pretty quickly. So when you're paying a good designer, those fees can accumulate rather rapidly. And I'm not saying that a project won't take $5,000 or $10,000 for a designer, depending on the scope, the size, the amount of the contract, and what kind of services they're providing. The final cost could be well over that easily, but you want to make sure that you're staying on top of it and you're not getting caught by surprise. So if they're billing you weekly, depending on how the contract reads, either hourly or a full contract amount, however they figure their contract amount. So you either want to be getting billed weekly for the hours or a percentage complete. And it's helpful if they possibly even have some kind of sketches or drawings or 3Ds as a percentage complete. How far are you at? What does that look like? Have you, gotten a basic floor plan laid out or whatever, depending on the project. Just, go use common sense and make sure that you're following up. When they bill you, 50% complete for design, they should have something they could at least be able to show you something, even if it's just some rough sketches on paper. So. Deposits. Most will ask for a deposit. Maybe your initial consultation was one fee, and then you've decided to hire the interior designer, and you will be looking at a deposit for the actual design process. They might include 2 or 3 options or revisions in the initial design process fee, and most of us are going to ask for anywhere from 20% to 50% of that design contract initial presentation as a deposit up front. So some of that covers even just the basics, paper and ink for printing out these designs when they bring them to you. So I want to make sure, just be aware and not be surprised if you see those. Then also you want to double check and review pricing in your area. It might be different in your area for designers. My guess, Angie's List would be a good place to check pricing. Home Advisor. There's some of those websites that deal in home remodeling and custom homes, where they are promoting local contractors and designers and the like. They should have some pricing available for you. I'm sure that you can, Google's wonderful for everything. So Google it, find out. In general, I have discovered that a good designer is going to run upwards of $200 an hour, or $15 a square foot, or depending on the project, maybe if they're there through the entire process, it might be a percentage of the overall project cost or something to that effect. So just keep those in mind. The more experience, the more education, the more expensive, they're worth it, right? So, and then, which brings us to the experience and education. Interior designer is going to have a combination of experience and education. For instance, I was educated with a bachelor's degree at the university here locally, University of Oregon, in the arts, interior architecture and architecture history. But I also have more than 16 years experience designing kitchens and bathrooms and spaces, working in this industry for over 16 years. And so that really allows for a lot of experience, ideas, general knowledge of what happens in a project, that I've only gained through the experience of working through hundreds of projects at this point. So, and then are they involved in local trade associations? For an interior designer, there's the Interior Association of Interior Designers, the IAID, I believe that's the initials. There's the Association of Interior Designers, the AID. Those are the two big ones. You can be an associate without being involved. You can also be an associate and be involved. They offer ongoing education credits. There's going to be trade magazines and trade shows. So as your interior designer doing those things, and it's okay to ask, right? And maybe it's important to you and maybe it's not, but it's not a bad question to ask. And then one of the other questions, final question, that I believe is important is when you ask a designer, interior designer, how do they address and approach conflicts in design aesthetics? I have a design aesthetic. I have my own personal taste in what I like or don't like, and that's fine. Everybody does. You're going to have your own design tastes, what you like and don't like, colors, contrast, what people call busyness or unbusyness, cleared spaces, homey space, whatever it is. We all have our own design aesthetic. For an interior designer, it is exceedingly important that they are willing to overlay that or weave that in to your design aesthetic. One of the very great lessons I learned my first year in the industry as an interior designer is I worked with a client whose design aesthetic was completely different than mine. Absolutely completely different. And what I learned from that experience was that one, it's fun for me to branch out and try new ideas and as an interior designer, hopefully that's the way they approach it. But also that it was very important that this client receive the space, the comfort, the ability to walk in their own home and know it was theirs. And yet, for me as an interior designer, to still be willing to put my name on the project, still be willing to show people what that, as a design process. And so that was really important. So remember that. If they are willing to weave those two things together, that's fabulous. Also be aware that, at some point at the end of the day, they're adding pictures of your project to their portfolio, and so that's also going to be important to them. In no way does that mean that you should give up something that is important to you or that you love in your design aesthetic. Just be aware that the marrying of those two things is very important. And so when you ask your interior designer how they broach that conflicts in design aesthetics, just pay attention to how they answer and see if you feel comfortable with that. So those are, I believe, important questions for you to ask an interior designer before you decide to hire them for a full project. And I hope that you have fun with it and you find interior designer so well suited to you. You have a wonderful day and a successful, beautiful, heartfelt project that you can love every single day.